Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and the as yet undefined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, coming at you, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations episode 818. You know, as you all know, on this channel, if you watch me for any length of time, you know that I consider myself a student of the entertainment business. There's so little I know about it, and I'm constantly learning every day. And one of the things I've always been fascinated about is the business of the film business and the people that run it. And the film business, more than other businesses, can be very transitory, especially when it comes to studio executives. I mean, all different kinds of companies acquire and then sell studios. It seems like I remember when I was a kid, Warner Brothers was a Kinney company, not Kinney Shoes, but it was a Kinney company. And then things changed. Paramount was Gulf and Western. You know, back when Charlie Bluedorn ran the company, like we saw in The Offer, or if you listen to Bob Evans' book, The Kid Stays in the Picture. By the way, if you want, I know Bob Evans now, you know, he's done the animated show and all that, but you know what? If you want to know stuff about Hollywood, one of the more entertaining things you can ever do is listen to the audiobook of Bob Evans reading his own book, The Kid Stays in the Picture. I remember when that audiobook came out in Hollywood, was in the 90s, I want to say. Everybody was listening to it. Now Quentin Tarantino's new book is something people are talking to me about. I haven't read it yet. I haven't cracked it open, but a lot of interesting commentary on that. And a lot of people disagree with Quentin, so I can't wait to crack it open and read it. But so, like today on the John Campea show, we were talking about the fact that rumors abound, of course, that Steven Spielberg and David Zaslav and Christopher Nolan and Peter Safran, the new head of DC Studios, were apparently having lunch together at the Warner Brothers Commissary, the executive commissary. So for those of you who don't know, I mean, I worked at Warner Brothers. I worked in feature production. I was a management trainee for Senior Vice President of Production Bill Young 30 years ago. But it hasn't changed much. I've worked on and off at Warner Brothers on the lot. When we produced Hills Run Red, of course, we produced that movie out of Joel Silver's office, Dark Castle Entertainment, which used to exist. There was a little donut, and on one end was Joel Silver's office, Silver Pictures, and on the other end was Donner's company. And that was there for a long time. But it was not unusual in the executive dining, or the executive commissary, the executive dining room, I guess you'd call it. Warner Brothers was a very busy lot. It's actually a working lot. They have beautiful sound mixing stages there. And when you think about it, it isn't unusual for people to get together, especially in the executive dining room, if they're working on things on the lot, to get together. I mean, everyone has to go to lunch. So if there's a confluence of people like Steven Spielberg, I mean, Amblin Entertainment is literally right up the street, especially if you go down Olive Avenue or whatever, you can go from the front of Warner Brothers literally to the back of Universal in a minute, literally in 30 to 60 seconds if you pull out, onto Barham or whatever, and do that, depending on what gate, whether it's not, things are not far apart. So it's not unusual to see people of legends having lunch. I mean, Clint Eastwood's Malpazzo Productions has been on the lot for 50 years. So when I worked on the Warner Brothers lot, seeing Clint Eastwood just walking was never, it was a normal occurrence, because you're on a movie lot, and the Warner Brothers lot has always been very busy. It has sound stages that are always working. So it's not unusual to be on a lot and see very famous people dining together. Maybe it means that they're plotting a new Superman movie, or maybe it means that Steven Spielberg is looking at a sound mix of the musical of West Side Story. Who knows? You don't know. What I am fascinated by, though, is how AT&T took over Warner Brothers not for very long, and then Discovery came in and purchased Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers is now Warner Brothers Discovery. And on the John Campea show, we've talked a lot about David Zaslav, the new head of the studio. And he's an interesting cat in the sense that he went on his listening tour where he really talked to everybody and learned about the business. Brought Alan Horn back out of retirement again. And I just find him to be very interesting. But there's a lot of talk about him and what he wants to do, and people are interpreting things that he says. And we do that on the John Campea show. So I basically wanted to do a Robservations to find out, well, what does David Zaslav want to do? Where is he coming from? And I wanted to just go on record, if only for my own edification, and find out what was he all about. And the quickest way to do that is to see what he said in last week's earnings call. And lo and behold, there's a transcript of it. So I figured I would not read the whole transcript, but I would just go to the transcript and share with you all and opine over what he had to say. And I figured, rather than talk about this was from November 3rd. It was a transcript of the Warner Brothers earnings call. It is the Warner Brothers Discovery. Their NASDAQ is WBD. Quarter 3, 2022 earnings conference call. And this happened at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 1:30 p.m. Pacific Time. And there are a number of people. I'm not going to read everything. The only person I was really interested in is David Zaslav. He is the president and chief executive officer of Warner Brothers Discovery. And he's the person we talk about a lot. So I figured I would just jump in here and read what he had to say on that earnings call, because I thought that would be something interesting to talk about. I guess I'll start at the beginning. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Let me start by saying I am pleased with all that we've accomplished in just our first 6 months as a combined company. We've had to work through a number of really tough issues, some anticipated, some unexpected, and we continue to make the difficult decisions that we now know are necessary to position our company for long-term growth and success. As you would expect with a deal of this magnitude in a dynamic and changing industry, and amidst the more challenging economic environment, a significant amount of change is required. In fact, we see this as presenting a meaningful opportunity, one that we have seized wholeheartedly. This is an opportunity to look inside each one of our businesses and really determine what's working, what's not working. Is it structured properly? Does it have the right assets, people, and resources to be effective and the best of class in the environment we face today? None of this is easy, and nothing happens overnight. That said, we are fully committed and laser-focused. I believe we have the strongest hand in the industry in terms of the completeness and quality of our portfolio of assets and our IP across sports, news, nonfiction, and entertainment in virtually every region of the globe and in every language. 6 months in, we now have a full, strong, and energized leadership team in place, and we are confident we have the right strategy and are making the structural and strategic changes to successfully achieve our goal of becoming the greatest media and entertainment company in the world, capable of generating significantly higher earnings and free cash flow than we are today, and creating the real long-term sustainable shareholder value. Now, On one hand, that's some typical gobbledygook that you say to your shareholders. But what I really like about what he's saying here, very clean, very crisp. We know exactly where David Zaslav is coming from. And we as fans of, let's face it, the entertainment they're going to make. And that was the last thing on his list was entertainment. But we want to know what's happening at Warner Brothers. I want to know what movies they're going to make. I want to know what they're going to do with DC. I want to know what they're going to. Now, remember, this happened 3 days after James Gunn and Peter Safran took over DC Studios. They had been at work, and that was 3 days after James Gunn had tweeted the comic art of Clark Kent sitting at his desk at the Daily Planet, typing an article with the tweet that said, new job. New job, back to work, whatever the tweet was. And I like what he had to say there. It was not a lot of flowery BS, but I'm like, okay, I'm with you, buddy. Sounds good to me. Last quarter, we laid out 3 strategic priorities that serve as our guiding principles and influence our decision-making, strategically, operationally, and financially. Starting with content. Content is the heart of everything we do, and we are investing at historic levels in the highest quality storytelling, sports, and news. All the hard work we're doing now will allow us to continue making meaningful investments in content to support our plans going forward. Our best-in-class portfolio is led by the strongest content and creative executives in the business. And one of the things that differentiates these leaders is that they do more than just pick shows and write checks. They support and nurture our creative and talent and help them to bring their bold visions to life on screens large and small. They are doers who have spent time in the control room developing films and TV shows, writing scripts, working closely with talent and creatives. They know their crafts inside and out and what it takes to create compelling, unforgettable experiences for fans worldwide. And they know how to replicate that success and storytelling over and over and over. No one embodies this creative commitment more than our new heads of DC Studios, James Gunn and Peter Safran, who have said that running DC Studios is a passion project, not just a job. James is a brilliant storyteller who has the distinction of being the first and only filmmaker to direct a movie for both Marvel and DC. Peter is a prolific producer whose credits include DC's highest-grossing movie, Aquaman, as well as the entire Conjuring universe, the most successful horror franchise of all time. We could not be more thrilled to have them join our leadership team, and I'm excited for what is to come. I spent a lot of time over the last few months with James and Peter talking about our strategy and long-term plans for the future of DC across TV, animation, and film. They have a powerful vision and blueprint that will drive a more unified creative approach that will enable us to realize the full value of one of the world's most iconic franchises. And they're hard at work now. That's pretty exciting. And that tells me that they'd spent a long time. This was not something, whatever's going on, whatever's percolating over at Warner Brothers, it's full on, man. It's going. It's moving fast. Our teams company-wide are working hard every day to ensure that Warner Brothers Discovery is the place creatives choose to come and tell their stories. We have a huge advantage. Warner Brothers, with its 100-year legacy and ability to launch films in every corner of the globe, tied together with Warner Brothers TV, the biggest maker of television in the world, and HBO, two of the most prolific storytelling studios in the world, and together it creates an unparalleled full-service entertainment ecosystem. To that end, we've recently signed a long-term deal with Matt Reeves, who co-wrote and directed The Batman and created the upcoming new series The Penguin for HBO Max. Todd Phillips will begin filming the highly anticipated Joker sequel next month. We signed an overall deal with Quinta Brunson, a trailblazer who brought us the hugely popular Emmy-winning TV series Abbott Elementary. And our longtime partner, the prolific Chuck Lorre, is producing his first series for HBO Max, the upcoming comedy How to Be a Bookie, with Sebastian Maniscalco, just to name a few. We're very excited about our robust film slate for next year. We are back in business with a lineup of features that is truly supportive of a distinct theatrical window. Fucking David Zaslav. The slate includes The Flash, Shazam, Doom 2, Aquaman, Wonka, a prequel to the classic film, The Color Purple, produced by Steven Spielberg, Oprah Winfrey, and Quincy Jones, and Blue Beetle, DC's first superhero movie starring a Latino character, directed by Angel Manuel Soto, as well as exciting new series for HBO and HBO Max, including The Idol from the brilliant Sam Levinson, who created Euphoria, and starring, it says indiscernible here, The Last of Us, based on the post-apocalyptic video game, along with new script and original series for TV, such as The Lazarus Project, set to air on TNT next year. We also have projects underway with incredible screen talent, including Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga for Joker 2. Ryan Gosling has joined Margot Robbie for the Ocean's 11 prequel. Robert Pattinson will return as Batman. Robin Thiede's Emmy-winning HBO comedy series, A Black Lady Sketch Show, has begun production on its 4th season. The award-winning cast of Succession will return next spring for its 4th season also, and the list goes on and on. Our unparalleled IP also allows us to grow our consumer products business and extend our characters into games, one of the fastest-growing media segments, with titles such as the most anticipated Hogwarts Legacy game, built around the amazing world of Harry Potter and launching in the first quarter next year, and leveraging incredible IP such as Mortal Kombat, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year and is still growing strong. Now, I won't talk about sports because, sports ball. But this is interesting. Our second strategic priority is maximizing the overall value of our content through an omni-channel distribution and monetization strategy. The fact is we cover more surface area than any other media company, and that optionality allows us to distribute our content in multiple ways. No matter where consumers go or what their preferences are, premium, pay TV, free-to-air, theatrical, streaming, gaming, we are there around the globe and able to monetize our content and IP in ways that maximize audience and profitability. Optionality has never been more important, and we continue to refine what the right windowing and distribution model is so that we can reach even more consumers and maximize profitability. As we said last quarter, we will be aggressively attacking the AVOD market with our own fast offering in 2023. As a company with the largest film and TV library in the industry, we have a unique opportunity to increase our addressable market and drive real value, and we plan to move quickly. Stay tuned. Finally, our third strategic priority is operating as one company. 1 + 1 does equal more than 2 when it comes to working collaboratively and supporting individual efforts across our many businesses. In many respects, this is a significant departure from the previous norm. We've already had some real success with our cross-promotional initiatives, such as with Shark Week, Elvis, House of the Dragon, and Black Adam. The fact is, with our huge viewership share in the U.S., our broad portfolio of networks and global platforms around the world, we have an amazing ability to efficiently cross-promote across our lineup. I love all of this. I mean, for somebody, obviously, he worked at Discovery for a long time, but his listening tour, all the people he listened to, he's saying all the right things here. And again, he's not blowing any smoke. He's explaining very succinctly what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and who's going to do it. So I love this, and this is pretty great too. Our one-team philosophy is a core tenet to the critical work we continue to do to transform the organization for the future. And nowhere is this more evident than with our ongoing commitment to driving synergy enterprise-wide. Success requires all hands on deck, and we are seeing it. In fact, I'm pleased to share that we've increased our synergy target to at least $3.5 billion from $3 billion. Then he goes on to talk about Gunner's going to take you through the details, blah, blah, blah. We are fundamentally rethinking and reimagining how this organization is structured, and we are empowering all of our business unit leadership to transform their organizations with Warner's mindset and view on quality and accountability. And you see this reflected in our numbers and some of the strategic decisions we are making. This is what they did. What he does is he lets people, they hire the right people, Peter Safran and James Gunn, and let them do their thing, as long as they are their mindset with a view of quality and accountability. So nobody's just going to go run roughshod and go do some crazy shit. They're still accountable, but the people that are hired are trusted to do what they do. And then he goes on and talks about advertising and the NBA and blah, blah, blah. That's about it. I mean, they talk about HBO. Hopefully, this is interesting. One is related to a product user experience. Previously, when a series concluded on HBO Max, there was no end card that would then recommend additional programs for the user to enjoy. An obvious way to drive greater consumer engagement. We've started rolling this out and are already seeing a very promising engagement uplift. I like that idea. Obviously, we've seen it on things like YouTube. Why not on a streaming series? And we have seen it, but a second example around content, we've begun experimenting with bringing D+ content onto HBO Max, starting with select Magnolia Network shows such as Fixer Upper the Castle. That's Discovery Plus content onto HBO Max. Fixer Upper the Castle, which was a top 5 show after only its first few days in the service. These early green shoots bolster our strategic thesis that two content offerings work well together, and when combined, should drive greater engagement, lower churn, and higher customer lifetime value. They're talking about churn, that people who come and go from the HBO Max, their streaming service. And lastly, on churn, we've implemented a number of initiatives to improve customer retention, and these have helped drive our voluntary churn rates to record lows in the last few weeks. We've still got a long way to go, but these early signs are encouraging. As we've said, we plan to roll out new services here in the U.S., followed by Latin America in 2023, then Europe, and afterwards. So he goes on and on, and you can find this online if you want to read it, but no one has a better or more recognizable hand of content, IP, brands, franchises, and personalities than we do. That said, I believe the grand experiment facing subscriptions at any cost is over. Let's face it, the strategy to collapse all windows, starve linear and theatrical, and spend money with abandon while making a fraction in return on the service of growing subscription numbers has ultimately proven, in our view, to be deeply flawed. We believe that there was real opportunity to do things differently, to deliver the content consumers want and will pay for while getting the full value of our offering. I love that. You know, the idea that you're just going to get more subscribers and that's going to make you money, that doesn't work. They're committed to theatrical. They're committed to bolstering value of their material through different marketplaces and then bring them together for more synergy on the back end in their streaming service. I love all this. As we said, we got lots more work to do. Profitability, not purely subscription count, is our benchmark for success. While we've got lots more work to do and some difficult decisions still ahead, we have total conviction in the opportunity before us. Warner Brothers Discovery. We've got the best assets in the industry, reach that extends from premium basic pay TV and free-to-air theatrical streaming, consumer products and gaming, exceptionally talented people across this great company, and the right strategy and financial framework to set us up for long-term success. So that's what David Zaslav said. It's not all he said, but, it gets technical with streaming and all that. But basically, what do we care? We care about the movies. We care about our favorite streaming shows like House of the Dragon and Peacemaker, etc. And we care about getting great content, whether it's games. If you're an imagination connoisseur, science fiction, fantasy, horror, you want your movies, you want your TV shows, you want your games, you want them to kick ass. And I think somebody like a David Zaslav really understands what he has to do, because he also understands he doesn't know everything. So he goes out and gets people that do. And he gets people that are multiple, they're hyphenates. I love the fact when he was talking about the fact that James Gunn is a novelist. I've said this before. His book, The Toy Collector, is right over there. He's a novelist. He's a filmmaker. He's he's a writer, director, and a producer. And now he's a studio executive. And all of that, I think, and Peter Safran's going to also... He's a producer and a money guy. So the combination of the two of them at the head of the studio, it's great. I'm really excited for what he's doing, and I think what David Zaslav said he was going to do is great, and I think that that's I like hearing this. I really think it's exciting. I don't know what you guys think, but we'll talk about it, and I'm going to start reading some letters from people. But I was just excited about what Zaslav said, and I think you should be too. I'm really curious to see where they're going to go. And maybe they did talk about Superman in the executive dining room. I don't know the answer to that. John Welbacher says he's been a member of the channel for 3 months. He says that Zaslav's saying he wants his franchises, and there are only a handful of viable franchises, should terrify people who want variety and interesting choices in what gets made. Seriously, Harry Potter 9. Well, here's the thing about that. Warner Brothers has a lot. They own a lot of different things, but let's face it. I mean, a studio cannot survive on just a few franchises. They can't put all their eggs into one basket. They have to develop new franchises. And I think, especially with DC, there is so much untapped potential there. Sure, they can have the Justice League members, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Green Lantern, Flash, and drive all that, but they also have to develop something else. I mean, who would have thought that Peacemaker would have been a big hit on HBO Max? I mean, if they start delving into like, hey, if we got a Kid Eternity series or Shade the Changing Man or something like that, I'd love to see an Animal Man series. That would be cool. They've got to develop these things, and that's why someone like James Gunn, who can, it wouldn't surprise me if James Gunn did a King Shark series. I mean, now that Stallone's on Tulsa King, why not come and voice King Shark for the King Shark series? Who knows? The King Shark prequel. But yeah, I agree with you, John. I mean, I think that there's not just only a handful of IPs, viable franchises. There's a lot, and Warner Brothers has a lot of them. I mean, hell, man. You could make it Any Which Way But Loose TV series. Heck, they probably did, and I just don't remember it. Let's bring back BJ and the Bears. Is that Warner Brothers? Rage Quit says, random, nothing is random. What is the most expensive hot toy that I have? The most expensive hot toy I have is probably the Hulkbuster from Age of Ultron. The Hulkbuster was that $1,200? I think that's the most expensive hot toy. The thing that Hot Toy made, that's the most expensive hot toy that I own, is that. So, yeah, I mean, that's easily the most, and it's right over there. That's the most expensive one. Our friend Glenn Mark, 1 of 2, says, meanwhile, in another universe, Winker's paranoid thriller focuses on the nightmare that is the court of public opinion. Is one man's life ruined? What is this? I don't know what you mean. Is this something I don't know? Stubble McShave sends in a tip. The tips are open. Sends in a tip and says, have you seen the Prisoner documentary In Your Mind on Netflix? If so, is it any good? I have not. I have not seen the Prisoner documentary. I don't know if it's any good. Glenn Mark says, cancel culture is about to escape the walls of the internet and invade the very ground he walks upon, coming to a universe near you, the Burnett. I hope not. I've survived people trying to cancel me before. Oh, is John streaming? Is John Campea streaming? I did not know that. John, I apologize. I didn't know you were streaming. Are you doing a late night stream? He doesn't usually do late night streams during the week. But that's fun. That's cool that he does. I, of course, have some letters to read. And you know that you can read, you can send me a letter that I will read on the show. Just send it to me at the link down below, postgeeksingularity.com. And I will read letters. And let's see what we've got. Let's see. The budgets of documentaries. Omar94, our friend Omar94 writes in a letter. and says, "Hi, Rob, moderators and Post-Geek Singularity. Something I've wondered about for some time is how documentaries never have any listed budgets. I remember thinking this when I was looking up documentaries I like, such as Death of Superman Lives, What Happened?" That's John Schnepp's great documentary, and Won't You Be My Neighbor? Obviously, they're never going to be on the same level as major studio movie budgets, but I never see any numbers listed. Maybe you can fill the gap to this mystery, since I always wondered that about documentaries. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, I'll tell you, as somebody who's been making documentaries for the better part of 25 years, when the thing about making a documentary is you don't always know how much it's going to cost when you start. You can only give it a ballpark figure, because when you're making documentaries, what happens is you have an idea of what it is that you want to make. Like I was having a discussion earlier this evening about a documentary project that I've wanted to do for a long time. And I was talking with a gentleman about crowdfunding this documentary. And the thing about it was, when I was doing DVD, early DVD work, like in the early aughts, back in 2001, 2002, 2003, my formula for studio documentaries that we were making was, for every original, if you wanted 1 minute of content, original content that involved interviews and things, I would charge $1,500 for that 1 minute of content. So if you wanted a 30-minute documentary, our budget was $45,000. Now, that $45,000 was all-encompassing. So for that, if there was travel involved, and when we were doing DVD stuff, travel was frequently involved, because we had to travel to sets, we had to put ourselves up, you had to rent cars, and you had to bring the equipment and personnel and everything like that. So it might seem like that's a lot of money, but it goes very quickly. But that was the formula that I had. It was $1,500 for 1 minute. So when you're budgeting for a documentary, remember, you can only ballpark it, because you never know where the documentary is going to take you. You can decide to say, for instance, okay, back in 2018, I was working on a documentary about one of the founders of the CIA, John Singlaub, and we went to South Korea to work on that. So when you're making a documentary about somebody, and we were going to South Korea, and we had to interview, we had to go to military bases and sit down with people, and you can budget all this out. For instance, say you're going to interview somebody. A lot of the time what you'll do is you'll rent a hotel suite, and you'll shoot your interviews in the hotel suite. So that becomes part of your budget. So it's tough to say. You ballpark a documentary, and you're like, okay, we're going to make this documentary for $250,000. And then you have to figure out, like, how many shoot days are you going to have? How much travel are you going to have? What is your post-production going to look like? How long are you going to give yourself to edit the documentary? So you budget a documentary just like you'd budget a feature film. But the problem is, you don't know where the story's going to take you. You know, you might plan on interviewing 10 people for your documentary, and those 10 people will you'll hear their stories, and you'll be like, oh, I have to go and interview these people. So you started out interviewing 10 people, and suddenly that might lead you to interview 25 more people. So it's hard to say. Sometimes documentary projects, not sometimes, a lot of the time, they're frequently ongoing things where people are raising money, shooting what they can, and then having to raise more money. So unless you have... And it's hard to get the money to make documentaries. The documentary that I want to make would probably be crowdfunded. And I would have a much better idea of who I want to interview. I mean, I already have many interview subjects in mind, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to work with 2 other people to produce this documentary with me. 2 other people that work in the same field that I've worked in. And they would add value to the project. And I think the 3 of us together could make something quite good. And then we could spread out... and get more interviews, get more material. So it's a good question, Omar. I mean, it's tough. It's hard to budget for documentaries because, as I said, it's ongoing stories. So you never quite know. This is interesting. Our old friend Torrin Atkinson. I haven't heard from Torrin in a while. Torrin Atkinson writes in, and the subject of this letter is preschool shows. Why do they go out of fashion with young kids? Av sent her in. I'm currently storyboarding on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, which is a preschool show for Disney Junior. Even though that I'm in the industry, I wanted to get some insight from the Post-Geek Singularity community. Why do you think a successful preschool show ends? If the target market is 3 to 5 year olds, doesn't the target market regenerate every 3 years or so? Teletubbies was immensely popular, but originally only ran for 4 years. Blue's Clues for 10. And of course, Sesame Street forever. But most preschool shows don't last, even if they're big hits. It has to be because of marketing, too, and interest of parents, right? Maybe some viewers have several children 3 years apart, and each can explain why the different kids might be into different shows. Are preschool kids really sophisticated enough to think, I'm not watching this show. That's what my older sister watched. I need something for me. And why do they stop making bananas in pajamas? Torrin Atkinson, Esquire. Well, Torrin, to be fair, I don't know if I'm the right person to opine on preschool shows, considering I don't have kids. But I would say this. I mean, people are fickle. Audiences are fickle. And when you're a preschooler, new generations of preschoolers, the churn, the turnover is quick because you're a preschooler I went to kindergarten. You go to kindergarten when you're 5, and that's considered, I guess, school, and preschool before that, 3, 4, 5, maybe till you get to kindergarten. So it's a very small window of time, and pop culture and things change pretty rapidly. And when you're a kid, every year that goes by can be an eternity. So after 2 or 3 or 4 years, maybe sometimes kids are like done. And when you get somebody new, a new kid, they want to see something new. I mean, you'd think though, by your reasoning, that you could keep producing the same show. I mean, Sesame Street's on forever, but when you watch, the thing about Sesame Street is, I always felt when I was a kid, like Sesame Street was a different day. Like every time you watch Sesame Street, you never knew when Mr. Snuffleupagus would roll into town and leave. So it was like when you'd see the people on Sesame Street in and out, not just during the little clips, this is brought to you by whatever, or this is the story of letter A or something. But the actual Sesame Street itself felt like it was just a different day. You're hanging out with people, and so it could go on forever. Whereas, I mean, when you're watching the same show, maybe kids, because life is moving so quickly or so slowly for them, things change really quickly. Maybe that's why shows don't last forever, because the real world is moving as well. And kids are growing up pretty quickly. And what interests a preschooler at 3 years old or 4 years old is not going to be the same thing that a preschooler is interested in when they're 6 or 7. But also, there's all kinds of new things. There's new toys every year. There's new stimuli every year. You never know when something's new. I mean, I don't know the answer. I would just think that it just happens so quickly. And again, like anything else, you can only make so much of a show before people want more money. And I think a lot of it has to do with who's making the show and how much are they getting paid. But again, I'm not the best person to comment on it. But since you asked, I figured that's what I could give you. I keep seeing this letter that people don't want me to read it. This is interesting. Brian Knight says, I want a Marvel DC Prisoner series. Robert, when you mentioned The Prisoner and Patrick McGoohan, I immediately thought of a Marvel DC crossover Prisoner series. A superhero is kidnapped, retired to an island. He or she wakes up as prisoner number 6 with the other superheroes. These heroes have accepted their retirement and don't mind not having to perform. The superhero keeps attempting to escape to warn the world and the remaining superheroes. I think that's a great idea, but then you just get, it's just The Prisoner again. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, for those of you who don't know, so The Prisoner is one of the greatest television shows ever. And it's only 17 episodes. It kind of has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's basically about a secret agent who resigns from his agency. We don't know why he's resigned. And as he's packing his bags to get the hell out of Dodge, he is drugged and he is dragged to a place called the Village. Where the Village is, we don't know. Who runs it, we don't know. But on the Village, in the Village, everyone is given a number. They don't have names. Their only identity is a number. And our main character is number 6. And number 2 runs the Village. And number 2s are always rotating. And one of the jobs of number 2 is to figure out, they want to break number 6 and find out why he resigned. What does he know? And they want to make sure that he hasn't turned. But the thing is, you never know who's running the Village and who is working for whom and what's really going on. And the show it really delves into, what does it mean to have an identity? What does it mean to be a free thinking human being? And, every year that goes by, I think one day the prisoner is going to get dated. And maybe in certain production values and certain areas it is dated, but the questions that it brings up, questions of identity and who are we, are just as relevant now as they ever were. The Prisoner is a great show. If you haven't seen it, Az from Heel versus Babyface, Az and I did a Prisoner review show. We switched off on my channel and his channel, and we reviewed all 17 episodes of The Prisoner. And I think they're a pretty good listen. I'm proud of that segment that we did. I thought it was really, really, really cool. I really enjoyed it. This next letter comes from Martin Zuhar. Martin Zuhar writes in, "Hi, Rob, connoisseur of light and sound and its magic. I occasionally watch your Robservations, hopping from the most recent to older ones. Being a Star Trek fan, I am most interested in the episodes concerning this topic. My Star Trek and movie sensibilities are rather similar to yours, and I'm looking forward to Star Trek Picard Season 3. Thanks for covering it. I recently watched an older episode concerning the not yet made Star Trek The Beginning." Okay, so Star Trek The Beginning was a script that was commissioned after Star Trek Enterprise went off the air. The people that ran Paramount, one of them was named Carrie McCluggage, and they tapped Eric Jedrinson, who was the supervising producer of the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers. And so Eric Jedrinson was tapped to write a Star Trek movie. And he didn't know much about Star Trek, just like Nicholas Meyer didn't know much about Star Trek when he was brought on board to work on Star Trek 2. So Eric Jedrinson immersed himself into Star Trek and wanted to create something that would follow on the heels of Star Trek Enterprise that was canonical, that would extend the franchise further. This was pre-Bad Robot getting involved and making Star Trek 09. So what he wrote was Star Trek The Beginning, which took place essentially 8 years after the end of Enterprise. And I love the script. And it was about basically the outbreak of the Romulan War. And in it, the Romulans have attacked a number of planets throughout the Alpha Quadrant that are harboring Vulcans. And they basically say, look, if you don't expel the Vulcans from your planet and get rid of them, because the Romulans were, of course, an offshoot of the Vulcans, the Romulans basically threatened each planet and said, we'll destroy your planet. Kick the Vulcans off, or we will destroy you. And Earth basically says, fuck you. And it goes from there. And it was really interesting because and I thought it was great. It introduced, they always talked about doing a Starfleet Academy show. It opens with new Starfleet Academy cadets that have just graduated. It's really, really, really good. It wasn't perfect because only one draft was ever written of the script, and then the regime at Paramount was replaced. And so nothing ever happened with the script. But what Eric Jedrinson was planning on doing was he called the first script the Odyssey. The next script he was going to do was the Iliad, and he didn't know what the third movie was going to be. But it was going to deal with the Romulan War, which is something that's been talked about. There's been fan films made about it. Novels have been written about it. But we've never seen it depicted on screen before. So really, really interesting script. And I really love the script. And if somebody said to me right now, okay, Rob, you get to take over the Star Trek franchise, but you have to greenlight something tomorrow. I'd bring back Eric Jedrinson, really smart guy. I would have him start doing a bit of a rewrite on Star Trek: The Beginning. It just needs refinement, and we'd be off to the races, because I think it's a great script, and it opens with something I always thought was kind of neat. It opens with a boat race in San Francisco Harbor, because Starfleet Command is in San Francisco. It opens with a big boat race, like these hover boats, like hovering catamarans, and all the cadets are sailing in a race, and to see who's going to win. And I love that idea. I love the idea of seeing the Paramount Mountain. And you know when they would push over and across and over the top of the Paramount Mountain, something would happen? I would love to, it's the Paramount Mountain and the camera rushes over it and past it. And like you're in Marin County and you come right out over San Francisco Harbor. You see the Golden Gate Bridge that's turned into like a maglev system now. And you see all of Starfleet laid out. And the camera goes and into the water and it comes up on these boats racing. I always thought, what a cool way to open a Star Trek movie. Probably never happened, but it would certainly be cool. So anyway, let me get back into this. So the not yet made Star Trek: The Beginning. And remember, I was reading this letter from Martin Zuhar. Martin says, I had the following idea. If Star Trek Picard Season 3 is a great success, fingers crossed, and Terry Matalas is offered to develop a spin-off series, and probably something else, and since he worked on Star Trek Enterprise, he would probably be the best candidate to bring Star Trek: The Beginning to TV as a miniseries. What do you think about it? Well, I think it's a pretty good idea. I sent him the script for Star Trek: The Beginning. I don't know if he read it, though, because here's the thing. As a writer, a director, and showrunner himself, I mean, if he's going to write something, he's going to want to create it from scratch. That's just the nature of the beast. I mean, and I get it. Just like Star Trek Picard Season 3 was given to him to be the sole showrunner, and he put together his writing team. They had to write it very quickly, but he oversaw it. It's his. So, there's not a lot of incentive for creatives like showrunners to not create their own material, because from a financial standpoint and a creative standpoint, you create something of your own from scratch. And I believe, obviously I don't know Terry that well, but I think he already has a couple of Star Trek projects up his sleeve that he's thinking about, because how could you not? Because if Star Trek Picard Season 3 is as successful as I think it's going to be, then I'm sure they'll come back to him to make more Star Trek. One could sprinkle, our letter writer goes on to say, one could sprinkle it with more legacy characters from Star Trek Enterprise. Hell, they could even resurrect Trip Tucker, as was done in the Star Trek Enterprise novels. I guess Terry Matalas may not be willing to bookend another Star Trek TV series, but he might be the best fit in a position to do so, or delegate it to someone who shares his Star Trek sensibilities and then just oversee it. The TV landscape could make such a production deal less of a target of messing it up to ensure a lowest common denominator appeal. By the way, me and my girlfriend, recently stumbled across a movie you may already know about. Wink, wink. It's called Tango Shalom. A nice, decent, and that's meant to be a compliment, comedy. Glad that these can still get made in the time of blockbusters and IP franchises. It took me some time to recognize Miss Renee Taylor. Oh man, the time really flies, doesn't it? Yes, Renee Taylor, who's in Tango Shalom, is actually an Academy Award-nominated screenwriter. Her and her husband, Joe Bologna, they wrote a film called Lovers and Other Strangers that was nominated for an Oscar in the early 70s. So they've been around. Well, Joe passed away during the making of Tango Shalom, but Renee is still going strong. You're going to see her in things all the time. She's pushing 90. Also, I recall you mentioned once that once revelations of a key story point and secrets are made, a movie or story can lose appeal or interest to you. Did you like Columbo? I loved Columbo. I find the premise, we already know who did it, and the mystery is how the murder is revealed, interesting, less thrilling, but still very enjoyable. Yes, I love Columbo. One more thing. Since I'm not a regular viewer of Robservations or Midnight Musings and other videos, I might have missed your talking about some of the below movies that are tips for your viewing pleasure. Ich bin den Mensch. It's a German human relationship study. I haven't seen that. Time Trap, I've seen this, a sci-fi movie about a group of college students searching for their lost professor. Champagne for Caesar, a surprisingly funny USA comedy with the great R. Coleman. He starred in Double Life, which was also great. With modern movies suffering from certain, let's say politely, current commercial trends, explored in detail in a series of videos by The Critical Drinker, I often find that old American movies have much more appeal to me than most of the modern productions. Thank you again for sharing your opinions and those of your listeners. I already look forward to hearing from you on YouTube again. Kind regards, Martin. Well, Martin, that was very nice of you to write. What a great letter. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that as a fan of movies, I'm always and all of film history, there's so many great movies. I mean, I think back to the output of John Frankenheimer, the director John Frankenheimer, just the movies he made in the 60s. If you think about it, you just take that one director. He made Birdman of Alcatraz. He made 7 Days in May. He made The Train. He made Seconds, which is one of my favorite science fiction movies of all time. And he made one of my favorite suspense movies of all time, The Manchurian Candidate, all in the 60s. And that was one director working across many different genres with Burt Lancaster stars in The Train, Kirk Douglas stars in 7 Days in May. 7 Days in May is a political thriller. The Train is a World War II action adventure. Birdman of Alcatraz is obviously a prison drama. Seconds is a science fiction movie. The Manchurian Candidate is a political thriller. And this is one director's output in the 60s. I mean, the man, and any of those movies is tremendous to watch. And you're right. I mean, I miss that. Nowadays, we barely have directors who have careers where they could make 2 or 3 movies, much less, 6 in a decade that cover the wide gamut of genres. And I long for those days. But a great letter, and thank you for writing in. I very much appreciate that. Let's see. This letter comes from Terrell Williams. Could a Star Trek Star Wars crossover movie work? Well, initially I'm going to say no, because they're owned by different companies and all that. But let's go with that. Because like with IDW, they could probably figure out a way to work it. I mean, Star Trek has crossed over with Doctor Who, with Green Lantern, with the Legion of Superheroes, with X-Men. So why not? Greetings, Mr. Burnett. From one dynamite pop culture connoisseur to another, hello. Hope your productive day is encouraging you to succeed on all levels. Well, it does, I guess. I thought today, Chris Carr and I did a great episode of The Weekly Hero on the John Campea channel. It is clearly evident that you and I grew up with the greatest generational era ever. It's true. It really is true. And if we were next door neighbors, we would have been best friends. Of course, you remember Saturday morning cartoons, live action shows like Super Friends, Land of the Lost, Schoolhouse Rock, and Shazam. Actually, also Ark 2, Bigfoot and Wild Boy, Dr. Shrinker, Electro Woman and Dyna Girl, and Wonder Bug. Or when the $6 Million Man was must-see TV on Sunday nights. I know you remember walking through the Mego action figure playset section of a Toys R Us store. Actually, I don't. We didn't have Toys R Us in Seattle, but we did have a store called World of Toys, and you are absolutely correct. And watching syndicated reruns of Batman, The Wild Wild West, and Star Trek. I have a box set of every Wild Wild West episode. Yes, Rob, I too miss those amazing times from my childhood. Some days I wish I had my own Guardian of Forever in my backyard just to look back. My question for you is, imagine a Star Wars, Star Trek crossover film. Could this work cinematically? Well, let me just point out that you can go onto my channel right now and look up Martino Simone's Play Trek, and the latest episode to drop, episode 3, he does this very thing. Of course, it's with Playmobil action figures and Star Wars action figures, but you get the point. Imagine a Star Wars Star Trek crossover film. Could this work cinematically? The story could take place right after the events of the Medal Award ceremony in Star Wars and after the events from the Star Trek episode Mirror Mirror. This, of course, would be a dream come true for many fans, especially if it's done correctly. Opening box office weekend would be at least $1 zillion and some cents, laugh out loud. Seeing Han Solo on the bridge of the Enterprise, Mr. Spock swinging Luke's green lightsaber, Mr. Sulu flying in an X-Wing fighter, or Lieutenant Uhura blasting away some stormtroopers would be insane. Thanks so very much for taking the time out to read my letter. Please continue your awesome work and stay motivated. Maybe one day my shuttlecraft from my Dreadnought class starship, the USS Malcolm X, will be parked right next to yours and Admiral M's. Always remember, success is living the life you want to live. Take care. Terrell Williams. Wow, this came in October 11th, 2022. I guess I'm behind. Well, Terrell, here's the thing. Obviously, clearly, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. I got to say, though, I am not keen. I think in comic book form, like when Star Trek crossed over with the X-Men, there was some good stuff there. Or when the Teen Titans crossed over with the X-Men. Darkseid and Dark Phoenix. I'm just not a big fan of that kind of gimmicky stuff. I mean, as a kid, I loved combining universes in my mind and flying X-Wings next to the Enterprise. But fundamentally, Star Wars and Star Trek are concerned with two very different things. Again, another Star Trek crossover. They did Star Trek and Planet of the Apes. The IDW comics actually make it kind of palatable. But for a movie, I don't know if I could ever really get into it. Because after the gimmicky nature of it all, I don't know how... I mean, you could probably tell a story, but I don't think in movie form people would actually buy it. I think it works better, much better, as literature, whether it's in comic form or novel form. I think it's more easily palatable. Or in toy form, as you can say and see on the channel. But Terrell, other than that, I think maybe you and we definitely could be friends. Absolutely. Let's see. Let's see. I got a lot of super chats. Let me catch up on super chats and see what you guys are. Super chats and tips. A tip has come in from Roberto Suarez, the great Roberto. Roberto Suarez asks, did you ever see the Prisoner movie with Jim Caviezel, and was it any good? It was actually a mini-series. And speaking of great shows, what do you think of The Singing Detective, the BBC series? Not the Robert Downey Jr. movie. It's one of my all-time favorites. The BBC series, The Singing Detective, is great. I love it. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's really, really good. Quite enjoyable. Absolutely. But, okay, so for those of you who don't know, I talked about The Prisoner earlier, the 17-episode Patrick McGowan series. They did a remake. I want to say they did a remake 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, that Jim Caviezel, Christ, as in Passion of the Christ, he played the new number 6, and Ian McKellen was number 1. And they actually shot it in Namibia, as opposed to Port Marion in the UK, where they shot the original series. It was okay. I think that there's been so many shows since then, like UPN. When UPN launched in 95, it launched with a Prisoner ripoff called Nowhere Man. And certain concepts, with Bruce Greenwood, certain concepts of The Prisoner have been, they're so, I don't know, they've been gone over so many times. I don't know. It's hard to make it all work. And I don't think, it was no Battlestar Galactica reboot. It wasn't as good as I had hoped it would be. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't as good as I hoped it would be. Roberto, thanks for sending in that tip. I very much appreciate it. Mark Spector's Avatar said, bro, I want to see Billy Zane back as the Phantom in a Disney Plus series, then pass the mantle. You know, I liked the Phantom. I thought it was enjoyable. It wasn't like, to be honest, I saw it once in the theater and I liked it, and I haven't gone back to revisit it again. But I could see something like that, doing a swashbuckling period piece series. I just don't know. You know, there's always talk about doing those, whether it's The Shadow or, well, The Spirit didn't work, but The Phantom. Hell, they were going to do, you know, Disney Plus was going to do like a Rocketeer series at one point. And then it was animated or it was live action. They never did. I'd love to see that. I like period sci-fi shows or superhero shows. I'd like to see it. Hell, I'd love to see a live action Fleischer Superman show set in the 40s. I mean, they'd never do it, but it'd be cool. I like that. So that's not a bad idea, Mark Spector's Avatar. Rage Quit says, your knowledge of films is truly phenomenal. Always love you in your own show and on the Campiest show as well. Saw the episode of you buying comic books. Oh, with the late, great John Schnepp. That was fun. I love comic book shopping. Well, I appreciate that. You know, I mean, I just love film. I've been studying film as a business and film as an art form my whole life. So, I mean, it's more of, I've just been doing it for a long time. And what I love about film is there's always more to see. There's films from all over the world that I'll never run out of films. So, Todd Kaparek in the live chat says they made a Rocketeer series, but it was a kid's show with a little girl and a protagonist in modern times. That's what I figured. I wouldn't want to read that. But yeah, I appreciate that. But there's always more to learn about films. Levi Shones, or is it Shones? I just saw Spirited, and I've got to say, solid Christmas musical with Will and Ryan. Shout out to Regal Cinemas for Mystery $5 Mondays. Wow, so they showed Spirited in a theater? I would like to have seen that. That's very cool. I wonder if Campion knows that. I got to tell him. Yeah. Glenn Mark says, Rob, have you read Thompson's The Woman's Law? I have not. I've not read Thompson's The Woman's Law. And did you like the 1920s film? Maybe was it the 1990s film, The Net, the Sandra Bullock movie, The Net? If that's what you're talking about, I liked it. I like The Net. Little outdated today, but I liked it. Dr. J with a $20 super chat says, Bobster, Zaslav spoke of further tough decisions to come from Warner Brothers. Do you think there are projects that are in the firing line for the axe, or is he indicating changes to the business? Well, look, here's the thing. At the studio level, there's a lot of profligate spending. There's a lot of money that gets spent for projects that never get made. And I think he wants to stop that happening unless a project, and I don't think he's wrong, to be honest. And there's a lot of money. Like, for instance, they've been trying to make a Logan's Run movie at Warner Brothers for decades. And there's probably spent millions of dollars in development costs. And do a Google search, just Google search Logan's Run and see everybody from Nicholas Winding Refn, Bryan Singer was going to do Logan's Run. Bryan Singer prevised his whole Logan's Run movie, and Chris McQuarrie wrote the script, and it was set on a giant orbiting Babylon 5-esque or Gundam-side space station. So, yeah, I mean, what can you say? So much money is spent. So I think, look, Zaslav is they have $3 billion they have to like cut back or make up, or I get it. He's making the tough choices, and that's what a good leader has to do in this day and age, because they've got to figure out how to navigate the waters and make sure that the company makes money. So I get it. I don't think that there are projects. Look, if the projects aren't good enough, and as Zaslav said in his call to the investors, if he's going to have his creatives, the people that he hires to make those tough choices to pull the plug on things, but they also have to make new things. So ultimately, while it might be painful now, as it should be, I think in the long run we'll be getting better stuff, which I think is great. Teriyaki Pigeon. I like that. Hi, Rob. Will the hierarchy of the United States change when The Rock runs for president in 2024? I don't know. Maybe Hobbs will be the Secretary of State. I don't know if the hierarchy will change, but I don't think that that he's going to run. Glenn Mark says, "Oh, it was a parody pun joke of the movie The Net." Sorry, too subtle. The Net, Burnett. Now I get what you're saying. It's just late. It's been a long day. A long day. But that was funny. I like that. Sam Sugart says, one of two. I've been meaning to get your opinion. I love DC Comics. It's my favorite universe to escape to. Unless you can get Ben, Gal, and Cavill, the Trinity all to return, I don't really want the DCEU. Sam goes on with a $20 super chat. Actually, two $20. He keeps going on. There's a perfect opportunity to restart with The Batman. Yes, it's realistic, but I have to point out that Iron Man was fighting a bald guy in a metal suit in the first film, and then a purple alien is his last appearance. Well, yeah, look, Sam, I mean, here's the thing. Any movie and any universe can be made to work with the right creative people. And I think Ben Affleck was great as Batman. I liked Gal Gadot a lot as Wonder Woman. And Henry Cavill is great as Superman. We're going to get a Henry Cavill movie back. I just think the DCEU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe works. They did a great job developing it so far over 30 years. I've actually heard some really encouraging news today. Apparently Quantumania is actually quite good. And I'm very excited for that. I was talking to somebody who was very excited for the film. Said it was very, very good. And I think, we're only one movie away from things being great. I love DC too. I grew up with DC. I was a huge DC fanboy. I'd love to see great DC movies, but I don't need a DC EU. I'd much rather watch, I loved Aquaman. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I thought Joker was a great effort for a singular Joker movie. Amazing. I think that DC should downplay its universe. I mean, I don't see the need to string it all together. To do a proper DCEU the way they've done the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think they would have to start all over again. And they're not going to do that because they already have an Aquaman movie, they got a Flash movie, they got a Shazam movie coming out, they've got a Blue Beetle movie. So they've got another year's worth of films. And if they make money, and they've got Joker, Fall You Do, the Joker Harley musical movie that's a sequel to Joker. And I don't see that starting up. I don't think they need to make a cinematic universe. I think they should concentrate on more movies like The Batman. And if it works, like Nolan's Batman trilogy, it's kind of its own hermetically sealed universe. I don't think in the Batman would be well served if the Martian Manhunter showed up. I just don't. I think it's like with the Nolan movies, they're unto themselves. And I like that. And I don't mind that. I would love it if James Gunn did Justice League International movie. I was talking about that today on the Weekly Hero. I love Justice League International. I thought it was hilarious. And I think James Gunn could do something like that justice. I don't know if people would buy it. And it would be really interesting to see Ben Affleck play the Batman in James Gunn's DC version, his version of Justice League International. I would get such a kick out of that. I don't know if they ever will. But Sam also brings up a good point. Iron Man the first Iron Man worked because it was a very grounded story. The mecha, the Iron Man suit and the Ironmonger suit were just machines. They didn't have the personality yet of bigger things. And the great thing about Iron Man was it was mostly about Tony Stark. And yeah, the Iron Man suit was great and flying around and it was great. And his final battle with Ironmonger was great too. But if you took Iron Man out of that movie and it was about Tony Stark discovering his conscience and learning that he couldn't in good conscience manufacture more weapons and wanted to change the corporate culture and change what his company focus was. And he came up against the board and Obadiah Stane, and they're like, nope, we're going to wrest the company away from you, Tony. We can't let you drive it into the ground. That's still a good movie. And it doesn't have to be, look, I've always maintained that great genre cinema, science fiction, fantasy, and horror, you can take the superhero-ness out of whatever story you're telling, and it should still work. I always tell people, if you want to write a great Star Trek story, take the Star Trek out of it. Write a story. Write a great story. If the story's great, then you can put the Star Trek back in. I mean, you look at Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. forget that it's Captain Ahab, it's Moby Dick. That story works whether you're in space or not. And the motivations Khan has to doing what he's done, brought about by Admiral Kirk's inaction. Admiral Kirk never bothered to check on our progress. I mean, all that makes sense. And people forget that. They get too tripped up, too caught up. The great thing I loved about the DC universe is you basically had gods grappling with problems of humanity, problems of fallibility. That's why one of the great things about Superman and Lois, the reason that show works is because it doesn't matter how powerful Superman is. It doesn't make him a better dad. Still got to be a dad. And I love that because you immediately get to the core of the character and his powers can't help him be a good parent. And I love that examination of even the most infinitely powered human beings on earth, if given whatever powers they have, that doesn't help them be a better father. And that's a great story. Now, is it a great Superman story? I think so. But eventually Superman's got to fight Brainiac or Metallo or whoever, Mr. Mixoplitic. You have to do that. So I know what you're saying. I mean, okay, so Sam goes on to say, the animated world by Bruce Timm built out from Batman fighting criminals to Clayface, a Superman show, and Justice League with powers. In either Pattinson or the DCEU, I want a full Justice League, Rob. Sam, I agree with you, but remember, creating something in live action is way different than creating it in animation. Way different. And look, I'm a big fan of Zack Snyder's Justice League. The operatic nature of it all. I liked that vision. But it's tough. I know what you want. I'd love to see that too, but it's really, really hard. Like, I've read the script for George Miller's Justice League Mortal, and I'm not convinced that would have worked. I'm not saying it wasn't going to work. It might have worked. But to make a Justice League movie is even harder than an Avengers movie because all the Avengers, with the exception of Thor, are human beings for the most part. Thor's obviously a god from Asgard, but it's tough. It's tough to do that. And the Justice League, they're all Batman, of course, is a guy, but when you're dealing with an Amazonian, a Kryptonian, a Martian, a Lantern, a lot, even though that's a man too, but still, it's tough to make people believe in that kind of stuff and make it all work. But look, I'm with you. I love all that stuff, so I'd love to see him get it done. Sonny Dominguez sends in a tip and says, Rob, I posted this in the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page based on what he has done at CNN and is doing at Warner Brothers. Is Zaslav pushing back against the woke culture? Based on the DC movies he canceled and the firing of anchors, it does make me wonder if it's more than just business. Well, I think that every company has a philosophy, an underlying philosophy about what they want to do. Look, I think that on one hand, look, there's a lot of marginalized voices that have never been given an opportunity to speak. And as anyone who watches this channel for any length of time knows, I am a proponent of storytelling in all of its myriad forms, no matter where the stories come from. What I don't like is when the obvious answer is, I love when a story gives me something to think about. I don't like when a story tells me what I am supposed to think. And I think that's problematic because it puts whoever's telling you the story, if they think that if they're pushing their message on you, why is it that they're pushing a message? Who are they? Are they better than you? Do they have some great insight? That's why I think great storytelling is really important, because a great story has the message built into it. Before you know it, you've heard the message and you didn't even know you heard the message. And I think that I hear this a lot from TV writers. They're like, well, we're going to use this as a platform to put our message out. Well, first of all, why? Why do that? I want a great story and great characters. But is that what Zaslav is doing? I don't know. I don't know. Look, obviously we need a world that is a lot more tolerant of other human beings. But I feel that in our quest to be more tolerant, to have a more a better world, we have a lot of people that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I see a lot of people out there. It's getting scary on either side, both sides of the aisle, at the far ends of the spectrum. It's rough. So I can see, like, look, the business of news, of presenting the news, like you said about anchors, is to report the news, not to necessarily inject your political messaging into, like, if there's an accident or there's a chemical spill. I think the idea of a chemical spill is chemicals aren't so good, are they? They're dangerous. You don't need to have somebody come out who's delivering the news and opine, if they're just a reporter, explain what they think of a chemical company or what they think of the dangers of chemicals or whatever. I want an anchor to tell me what happened. And I can see, like you just asked, about Zaslav getting rid of anchors because of their messaging. It's just like what I find so strange watching a lot of teachers, when you see teachers talking about teaching what they think is important about their own identities, and they're trying to share it with their class. I think that's out of line. I think when you're a teacher and your job is to teach reading, writing, arithmetic, history, whatever, teach that. And don't cross over into areas that parents should be leading the charge in terms of what their kids should and shouldn't know. And let kids be kids too. Why are we so quick to kill off the innocence of children? I think that and burden them with things that we adults care about. Let kids be kids. We don't want to get rid of the innocence of childhood too quickly. You know what I mean? They'll get there soon enough. Colonizer Jeebus is a new member of the channel. Thank you, Colonizer Jeebus. Thank you very much. To a PGS hero. Our friend Darth Plato, who always has interesting things to say. He's been a member of the channel for 24 months. Thank you very much for that, Darth Plato. I appreciate it. Some old guy in Hawaii, how are you, sir? Sends in a super chat and says, the Avengers TV show movie got a lot wrong, including a badly miscast. Oh, you're talking about... So there is the other Avengers, based on the British TV show, John Steed and Mrs. Peel. The Avengers TV show movie got a lot wrong. I mean, including a badly miscast Uma Thurman. Love her, but no. The Phantom introduced an ideal Mrs. Peel, a relatively unknown Catherine Zeta-Jones. Thoughts? Hey, you got no Catherine Zeta-Jones? Well, look at her in Zorro. She would have been an awesome Mrs. Peel. And remember, I mean, if anyone hasn't watched the Avengers TV series, it's delightful. Don't watch the movie with Sean Connery as the bad guy. And as much as I love Ralph Fiennes, no. It was not a good movie. Really, it was not a good movie. In any way, shape, or form. It just wasn't good. But I love that. Catherine Zeta-Jones would have made an amazing Mrs. Peel. But I think now is a little too late. But I'd love to see a new take on the Avengers. Teriyaki Pigeon says, what are your thoughts on or favorite exploitation films? Oh my God, dude, that's such a wide... I love exploitation movies. I have a lot of exploitation movies. I mean, what are my thoughts? I love them. I love extreme... we got Terrifier 2. We got a great exploitation movie in the theater today that passed $10 million at the box office. Can't believe it. I love exploitation films. They're like punk rock, depending on... But there are some exploitation movies, like, for instance, Gaspar Noé's Irreversible, which I own on 4K. That's a total exploitation movie, but it's an art house exploitation film. But there's a scene in that movie I can't get through. The rape scene when Monica Bellucci, I can't watch it. I don't do well with sexual violence against women. And it's totally exploitative. But it's brilliantly done. But then again, I just bought They Call Her One Eye, or Thriller, A Cruel Picture. The American version was called They Call Her One Eye. It's the character that Daryl Hannah was referencing in Kill Bill. What do I think of that movie? If you guys haven't seen Thriller, A Cruel Picture, the Swedish, in America, there's a cut down version called They Call Her One Eye that Quentin Tarantino referenced, but the original version, the Swedish version, is totally exploitation and it's hardcore. But I love exploitation movies because that was my form of punk rock. The more exploitative, the better. So I'm a fan. It's just I do find this Terry Occupation. I have a lot of exploitation movies in my collection, and I find that I've gotten older. I see less value in them for me personally as you get older in life. I think they're better when you're younger, because as you get older, you watch them and the fun is taken out of them. But I love them. Thomas Logan says, Rob, I got my Arrow Videodrome 4K. Let's see here. Hang on. Where's mine? Right here. Here it is. Which cover did you get? I got mine. Here's my Videodrome 4K from Arrow. Very excited to have this. I had to go for the original, the cover of the American key art. This is the American key art. I love Videodrome. The Arrow does such a good job. Their transfers are great. So Thomas Logan says, Rob, I got my Arrow Videodrome 4K. If A24 was remaking Videodrome with a $30 million budget and Cronenberg told you he'd give it his blessing if you would write and direct, how would you do it today? Who would you cast? Who would be your DP? Thomas, that's a really good question. Thanks for the super chat. And I'll tell you, I've thought about that. I used to work for Pierre David in the 90s. I read screenplays for Pierre David, and he produced Videodrome, he produced Scanners, and I pitched him. I went in and pitched him a Videodrome sequel or a remake of Videodrome, and it was all based on the internet. You know, now it would be Videodrome would be a show on the dark web or something. I mean, it would be... You know, it's interesting. For those of you who haven't seen Videodrome, it's an early 80s Cronenberg film, and it's on one hand, it's incredibly dated because of the technology, videotapes and pirate stations and all that, but you'd have to take it to the internet or the virtual world. I'd go even further, and I would somehow combine the metaverse or virtual reality in with Videodrome. And what does all of that mean? And I would add some Cronenbergian philosophy, like, you know, talk about exploitation. If you guys haven't seen the movie Martyrs, it's not a pleasant film, not the horrible American remake, but the original French version. It's a hard movie to watch, but it has a philosophy to it. And at the end, I find it, in a way, kind of uplifting. And then, of course, something happens that's not uplifting, but you'd have to go that. If I were to make Videodrome, since you asked the question, who would be my DP? Roger Deakins. Well, why not? Maybe he'd be attracted. And who would I cast? Oh, I don't know. It's hard to say who I'd cast because it's hard to come up with an idea. I don't know what it would look like, but I would combine something to do with virtual reality, and my Videodrome would deal with the dark corners of our minds, and I would really, it would have to be a combination of Hellraiser meets Videodrome meets 50 Shades of Grey meets some kind of hardcore something, but it would be delving in using the virtual world, delving into, like, I'll tell you, let's see, it's funny now that I mean, I would have to sit there and write the scenario, but here's what I would imagine. Like in Neil Stephenson's novel Snow Crash, in the virtual world, they create this thing called the street. And the street in the virtual world is this street that's infinite. It's just one street it goes on forever because it's in the virtual world. And all the big companies, they all erect virtual buildings on this street, and your avatar, a la like Ready Player One, but you descend into this world on the street, and your avatar walks around, and it's like a giant endless city. Well, I would do something like my Videodrome would be, what if you could go to a virtual representation of hell, but it was souped up hell. It wasn't like, not the Hieronymus Bosch hell, not the hell that's described like in the Bible. But a hell that sort of combines not just extreme S&M, but modern neuroses and whatever. And yet you could go there and experience all of these things for a catharsis, something like that. It would have to be involved with that. But I don't know who I'd cast because I without knowing the whole story, I have no idea who I'd cast. But I want to get Roger Deakins because he should shoot everything. That I would do something like that. Glenn Mark says the 1920s The Net by J. Gordon Edwards. I do not know that. I'd have to look up, and that's obscure. I don't know. I don't know that. I have to look into that. John Welbacher says James Gunn has already said his intention is to look forward with the new DC universe and tell the biggest story ever told across multiple films, television shows, and animated project. He is doing a shared universe. That'd be great. I mean, that's very ambitious. The thing is, remember, his contract is only for 4 years. So, I mean, even if he were to start tomorrow, he's only got, I mean, if he was directing or even making a franchise, there's not a lot of time there. You know, you could make 2 big movies, or if you had 3 filmmakers each making 2 big movies, maybe 6 movies. Hopefully he'll re-up, but they've got to do something quickly. But I could see them, if that's what he's saying, I mean, that would be great. I'm curious to see what they can do in the time allotted to them. Jaimin D says, "Hey Rob, I just wanted to recommend my movie for the night, which is The Ninth Guest with Donald Cook and Edwin Maxwell. If anyone is in the mood for some midnight mystery and don't mind black and white, here it is." I was going to say, is that The Ninth Guest, the black and white one? Yeah. That's a great movie. I haven't seen that movie in ages. Oh my God. I have to look into that. Good recommendation, man. You come up with some good ones, some obscure but good ones. Nat Zagree says, Rob, favorite musical, film and stage, thanks. That's tough. Les Miserables probably is my favorite musical that I saw on stage. But I've seen, musicals. I saw a lot of them. I saw Camelot on stage. I've seen Cats. I've seen most of the classic musicals, but probably Les Miserables. But that's for stage. But film, probably something different. I mean, that's I don't know. I mean, I have to say I love the original West Side Story. I mean, I've loved that. I've seen it in 70 millimeter like 3 times. I mean, I love the original West Side Story. I like Spielberg's version, but I mean, I grew up with the original West Side Story, and I really like that. But I think my favorite film musical's got to be Singing in the Rain. I saw Singing in the Rain my first day I was at USC. I've told people this before. I owned Singing in the Rain on Laserdisc, but I'd never watched it. And the first time I saw it was on film. I saw it projected in the Norris Cinema, and I was just completely enchanted by it. And I mean, I love the singing, I love the dancing. And another one of my favorite musicals, although it's a little odd, is The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, Jacques Demy's movie. It's an operetta, really. It's a movie that's entirely sung, but it's a heartbreaking romance. And if you haven't seen The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, oh, it's killer. It's killer. Love it. Norwegian Kryptonian says, not gonna lie, Steven Spielberg's Superman starring Henry Cavill, I'm already in love, shine on. Hey, who doesn't love that idea? I mean, I would love to see that. Love to see that. Love to see that. I don't know if we ever will, but damn would I love to see that movie. I mean, who wouldn't? Can you imagine a Steven Spielberg directed Superman movie? He would bring the heart to it that I think Superman has been missing. And I'll tell you something, Henry Cavill could bring that heart. I would love to see Steven Spielberg direct Henry Cavill as Superman. Paula Burr says I would make it freaky. If I did Videodrome, it would be really freaky. I mean, it would be, but then again, remember, the thing about Videodrome that people forget is it isn't just the show Videodrome. It's spectacular optical, and it's the plot to condition people's minds and all of that thing. I'm fascinated by, like, what does it mean that we now have these weird virtual relationships with people? Whether, you fall in love with your favorite OnlyFans model, or you're texting somebody you might not know if they're who they are. You get catfished and all that, and what that means for our imaginations. And it could be really interesting, I think. So you never know what's going to happen. That would be my Videodrome thing, and you'd have to lean heavily on the reality and the fantasy of it all, which I think could be quite interesting. I'd love to see somebody take a crack at that at Videodrome, but it would have to be, it'd have to be great. It'd have to be great. You don't want to mess it up. John Welbacker says, before Warner Brothers, David Zaslav was known for being awful for creatives and is cited as a driving force of destroying basic cable through homogenizing content. I just can't trust his PR statements knowing his history. Well, I don't know that about him. I don't know much about his past history, but homogenizing content, how? He's also hired people and allowed them to do what they've always wanted to do. We'll have to see. The proof is going to be in the pudding. I do think by hiring James Gunn and also Pam Abdi and what's his face? Why am I can't think of it. It's late. Why am I drawing a blank on his name? And I know him. But the people who run Warner Brothers, he's hiring good people, and we'll see what they are allowed to do. Obviously, proof's in the pudding. Donnie Pearson says there are other musicals based on operas, including Jonathan Larson's Rent. Yeah, it's true. I liked Rent. I didn't love Rent. I know it was. I saw Rent on the stage, and I thought it was good, but I didn't think it was great. I know it was groundbreaking and all that. Paul says that the obvious answer is Phantom of the Paradise. I love Phantom of the Paradise, but it's not my favorite. It's good, though. It's good. Magic Case says Steven Spielberg has been talking to do a Black Hawk movie for years. That is more possible for him than a Superman movie. Here's the thing. I don't know if a Black Hawk movie I don't know if the audience would care if it's a Black Hawk movie set in World War II. For those of you who don't know, the Black Hawk is a DC Comics. It's a World War II set characters where you've got flyers. I just don't know. I know he wanted to do that because of his World War II. It's a combination of World War II and superhero, not superhero, but heroic DC heroic characters. But I don't know. I don't think the audience would be there for a Black Hawk movie. Although I did like Howard Chaykin's version of it for the comics, his updating. John goes on to say, David Zaslav's past is known, and it is disingenuous just to take him at his word because you just now have heard about him. Very few people have worked with Zaslav have nice things to say that matters. Well, I haven't read that stuff. I'd have to go back and read and hear what people have to say. All I know is that Discovery's been very successful, and they do have a wide variety of programming that he's been made successful. So I don't know. I personally don't have any knowledge of Zaslav's background. I'm just curious to see how he's working. Look, as somebody who's a student of all of these different regimes and how things are done in Hollywood, ultimately what defeats Hollywood executives is Hollywood itself. Because at the end of the day, you can say whatever you want, but you're making entertainment that people have to want to watch it. Either buy it, stream it, pay. Basically, whatever he's going to make, they're going to have to buy it. People are going to have to buy it and like it. Warner Brothers is only going to be as good as what they make. And from what I understand, Zaslav doesn't interject himself in that process. Joshua Gonzalez says, is All That Jazz a musical? You know what? It's got musical elements, but I've never considered it a musical. Not like I consider Cabaret a musical, which is another one of my favorite films. All That Jazz is in my top 10 of all time. So, But I don't know, John. I'd love to find out more about David Zaslav and see how all that's going to go down. Rage Quit says, when listing top 10 films of all time, will you have two separate animated live action? In my opinion, they are two different forms on film, so it only makes sense. Yeah, I mean, Rage, I'm with you 100% on that. I don't. Animation and live action are almost totally different disciplines. Storytelling wise, they're not. They're still telling stories, but the way they're made is totally different. And I think you're right. I don't think it's fair to compare. That's why whenever an animated film competes at the Oscars for Best Picture, I don't think that's really. I don't think that's fair because I don't put them in the same class. I don't think one is better than another. I just think they're totally different art forms. They're both movies and they're both stories that can take 90 minutes to 2 hours in length, but the way they're made and the disciplines required to make them are very different. They utilize the same tools, but I don't think they should be judged together. And I think you're right about that. Sonny Dominguez fires in another tip. He sends in a tip. He says, Sonny Dominguez says, OnlyFans. What kind of nerds pay tip money to interact with a person on the internet? I mean, I don't get it. By the way, here, Rob, this is my tip for interacting with you. Oh, crap. You are the nerd version of a hot toy OnlyFans model? Cosplay for better tips. Well, you know what, though? I'll tell you something. What's different is, obviously, we all yearn for that kind of different companionship. With OnlyFans, it taps into something that's part of our imagination, our fantasies. I don't think anyone interacts with me fantasizes about doing so. However, you know, there was a she wasn't an OnlyFans model. She was, I don't even know where I found, somehow a long time ago I found this model on the internet, and she was like an OnlyFans model, but she never took off all of her clothes. She was always had her clothes on. She was incredibly beautiful, and she was incredibly sensuous about the way that she moved. I mean, she was amazing. It was mesmerizing. She had it down without revealing anything, so she would never, like, if she ever got a job somewhere. And, like, in her description, I want to say she lived in Austria or something. It was and she lived by a museum or something, and I just thought, that can't be true. I mean, even her bio, I looked it up. Even her bio was part of the fantasy, and she did such a good job. And I never paid her any money, but I appreciated her. And then she disappeared. I send me notices when she streams. She never streamed very much, but maybe she never even existed at all. And now, of course, I can only imagine what are the company. I don't know what the parent company of OnlyFans is, but wait until AI gets to the point where you don't even have to have real people anymore. I mean, which is kind of sad. We're all going to be looking at least I'll always exist. You always know you're not going to introduce. You're not going to interact with me and not know that I'm not real, which is good. I hope. So, Sonny, you're a funny guy. Funny man, funny like you make me laugh. Michael Preston says, hi, Rob. Good to see you back regularly. Do you think there's going to be a Wonder Woman 3? Hopefully with a good writer. Wonder Woman 84 was awful. Wonder Woman 84 was truly wretched. And I have to tell you, it is inexplicable to me how you go from Wonder Woman. I mean, Patty Jenkins did not develop Wonder Woman. The creative was really pretty much done before she came on board. But Wonder Woman 84 was truly inexplicably awful to me. And I none of it worked. Although I did buy that Golden Armor Wonder Woman hot toy only because that was from Kingdom Come. And I'm going to put her right next to my Kingdom Come Superman one day. But yeah, it was terrible. Oh boy, that was bad. But look, I like Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I would love to see a great Wonder Woman story. I really would. I think it'd be really, really, I think that would really be great. John Welbacher goes on to say, fair to be optimistic in general, but people who are worried aren't basing it on hysteria, but his past. His Warner Brothers CFO, for example, was so stingy, some disco producers took personal loans to finish projects. Yeah, but that's not going to happen at the Warner Brothers level. I don't think. And the thing is, being stingy in some circles isn't necessarily a bad thing. And the thing about making movies and things like that is they're budgeted beforehand, so you know what you're spending going in. So there's not going to be a problem. Piku says that this is interesting. Video tubers mix both by being real people openly portraying a fictional persona behind a rigged animated figure. Yeah, I've seen all that. It's crazy. What is reality anymore? That's why I think a modern Videodrome movie could work. It would be interesting. I think that would be. I would like to see that. But you're right, John. I don't know enough about Zaslav. I haven't. I'm just curious. When you take over a studio, and he did go on that listening tour where he talked to a lot of people in the industry before he was making moves to find out what works and what doesn't work, and how he's going to make everything. How is he going to make it? How is he going to make Warner Brothers work? Because ultimately, the trap is you still have to make good movies. And I think movie making is the one profession in the world that everybody thinks they can do. Not necessarily, most of the people I've met in the world always at some point say, I have an idea for a movie, or my friends at work are really funny. They should make a show like The Office about us. Everybody thinks that. So it's a strange thing. He's going to have to deliver, and he's going to have to start making things. I mean, he's trying to cut back on the debt load, but he's still going to have to go make movies that make money. And it's hard. It's really hard to make good movies. Really, really difficult. So, hey, we'll see if they can do it. I hope they can. I mean, I just want to see great movies like we all do, which is awesome. So, it's funny. Rotten Tanuki says, Post-Geek Singularity, this is in the live chat, need your help. As a kid in the 1980s, I saw a film that was a ripoff of Indiana Jones, but was rated R, and it took place in the jungle with a metallic boar and cannibals. Was that an Alan Quartermain movie, maybe? Alan Quartermain in one of the canon film Alan Quartermain and the Lost City of Gold. It could be. Could be that. I mean, if it was in the 80s, there's Jake Speed. I don't think it's Jake Speed, but yeah, there's there's a great article. Here's a great article. The most ridiculous Indiana Jones ripoffs that ever happened. King Solomon's Mines. That's another one of those. King Solomon's Mines with Sharon Stone. Treasure of the Four Crowns. That was not good. Sky Pirates, I don't think that's the one you're looking for. Bloodstone, that was not good either. Invaders of the Lost Gold from 82, that probably wasn't it. Hunters of the Golden Cobra. Ark of the Sun God. Jake Speed was what I was thinking of. That's on this list too. River of Death from 89, although Denholm Elliott's in that too. So yeah, those are some. I don't remember the metallic boar. I don't know about the metallic boar. Other than like Razorback, Russell Mulcahy's Razorback, but don't know. John goes on to say, it's hard to get points across in Super Chats, but the Warner Brothers CFO took away established budgets, and the loans were the only way to bridge the gap. Money shouldn't all be that matters for a studio. Well, I mean, perhaps not, but studios are there to make a product. They're there to make entertainment, TV and movies. That's really all they do. That's the product. I mean, we have to stop thinking about from a studio perspective, they're supposed to make movies and television shows. And movies and television shows are all kind of made the same way. And you need the difference is how good the people that are making those things can make them. But I do think that's really all and it is. I mean, I only want to see great movies and TV shows. I really do. And nowadays, I don't think there's much excuse for studios have access to the greatest people in the world. And the fact that they make things that aren't good is surprising to me, considering there is so much good stuff you can point to and go, let's make that and that and that, and let's not make this. Problem is, unfortunately, the way the corporate system works, the people that work actually at the studios might look to be a good hire on paper, but they don't actually know how to make a movie, which is sort of funny because studios are one of the only places. That's why it's so cool that they hired James Gunn, but studios are the only places where the people that run the studios haven't actually made the product that they're selling or that they're creating. The people that are in charge have never actually made the thing that they're in charge of overseeing, and it's weird. I think that's a big problem. Michael Preston says that he watched Play Trek, the newest episode. Any chance when the series is complete, we can get it on 4K Blu-ray? Still the best cost Star Trek content since DS9. Well, it's not up to me. That would be up to Martino Simoni. I mean, I'm sure he would love to hear that you love Play Trek because it's so much fun. And he works really hard on it. So I will ask him. That it would actually be pretty fun to make a Blu-ray or a 4K and release the episodes. He needs to make a lot more, though, so he can really fill up. I mean, his last episode, not this one, I think episode 2 was like 24 minutes. Episode 3 is 16 minutes or something? And it'd be interesting to see if we did that. I would love that. John goes on to say, okay, one last super chat, only to give you support. I love the show and content as always, Rob. Thanks for the outlet and the awesome community you developed. I honestly hope you're right and I'm wrong. Hey, it's not about being right and wrong. I mean, I just hope spring's eternal. The thing is, the proof's in the pudding. We'll know whether David Zaslav's reign at Warner Brothers is successful in 2 years. We'll see what he does. We'll see what he does with HBO Max. We'll see what he does with Discovery, and we'll know. Hopefully it's good. I mean, the entertainment business is in a weird, volatile state, in the middle of a sea change with streaming and theatrical and trying to figure out. Here's what I believe is the real problem with all of Hollywood and everything that's going on. Our society simply does not value content, and content doesn't live within us the way it used to. It's been replaced. All content has now been reduced to the same size thumbnail on streaming services. So movies that used to matter a lot more than they do now, like you talk to young people, and this is not a slam on young people, but ask how many 16-year-olds do you know, if you know 16-year-olds, that get excited about movies? They just don't. I've always said movies were the art form of the 20th century. I'm not saying people don't get excited about them, but it's in one ear and out the other. You know, it's movies were a much bigger cultural force. Now, that's not to say that a movie like Wakanda Forever isn't, because Wakanda Forever, there's a lot wrapped up in a movie like Wakanda Forever for a lot of people. But that's not every movie. Most movies are in one ear and out the other. It's amazing to me that the studios will spend $200 million on a movie that's essentially disposable. You know, it's for entertainment purposes. It comes and it goes. You know, when I was watching movies growing up, the best of them, they stayed with you. You know, but that was only because of my generation, and I was the first generation. I worked at the second video store in the United States. It was in Seattle. It was founded by Weston Nishimura, if you look him up, Weston Nishimura, he founded the VSDA, but Video Space was the second video store in the United States after Video Station that Andre Blais started. Andre Blais, my hero, the man who founded home video. But yeah, I don't even know what I was saying. Where was I going with that? I was going with something. But yeah, movies just don't matter as much anymore because we've got incredibly sophisticated video games. We have TikTok. We've got, I mean, look, like I always say on the show, I always say, and this is a tough thing to swallow, but if you take 100 people and they have 2 hours, they have 120 minutes of time, same 120 minutes for all of them. What would those people choose to do with that 120 minutes? They have to do something to entertain themselves. Some people would watch a sporting event. Some people might just sit there. I've been guilty. I've gone through 90-second reels for 2 hours. Totally entertaining. TikTok videos, playing video games. It's the same 2 hours. If you asked me in the 1980s how I'd like to spend 2 hours, it'd be a movie. Every day and twice on Sunday. I would say, oh my God, I'd go see a movie. That's pretty much the same now. But now I'd be like, yeah, well, if Grand Theft Auto 6 came out, as soon as it comes out, I would probably play it for weeks at a time. So there's a lot to be said for that. So there's more entertainment choices, and the position that movies have in our society are different. They're more like they're events. You go out and you experience them, but then they come and they go. And I think there's so much content out there. I've watched entire seasons of streaming shows. I know I've watched them. I remember watching them, but I don't remember what they're about. I used to see a movie once and I could remember half the dialogue. But now there's so much to watch, so much to see, I don't. And it's kind of rough. It's kind of a bummer. George the Giant Slayer sends in a sticker and says, "You're amazing." Well, George, we're all amazing, really, if you think about it. Like I've always said on the show, Dr. Manhattan, the great cosmic miracle of life, there's only in the entire infinitude of the universe, there's only one of each of us. That's a thermodynamic miracle. The odds that we exist at all is insane. And there's only one of us in the entire, I mean, there's twins too, but even twins aren't exactly the same. There's only one of every single person on this earth. And we're the only ones of us that exist in the entire infinitude of the universe, which means each human being is one of the most valuable commodities in the universe, and we hate each other. Think about it. That's nuts. It's crazy. We're amazing. If you look at it that way, come on. We're totally amazing. So, yeah, those are the days. Let me see if I have another letter to read that, and send us off with one more letter, a good letter. I'll try and find a good letter. Remember, if you want to write a letter to me, you can, at postgeeksingularity.com. And it's free, unless you want to send me a really long letter. But you don't have to send me a really long letter, and it'll be just between us. Or unless you want me to read it. Remember, if you don't want me to read it live on air, say not for air. So, there you go. And I think, do we have a good one? Well, I'll read another Omar 94 letter. Our friend Omar, he wasn't writing for a while, so here's another one. I'll leave you with this. Omar 94 will take us home, Omar. Hi, Rob, moderators in the Post-Geek Singularity. I just want to start off by saying it's good to see Robservations again every once in a while. As an idea, you could always make Midnight Musings the new Robservations since you're busy with John Campea throughout the week, and because you have read articles and letters on that show too. I was reading something about film critic Pauline Kael, which claims she only watched movies once before reviewing them. Well, remember, back when she was reviewing them, she would go to the theater and then see them, and a lot of the times they hadn't even opened yet, so she could only watch it once. I don't know if others have this going on, but something I've noticed with certain highly acclaimed movies is how I didn't like them when I first saw them, and I ended up liking them when I rewatched them later, changing my stance on them. I remember thinking this first when I rewatched both Chinatown and L.A. Confidential. When I first saw them, I didn't really like them, or I didn't think I did, because I remember liking many parts of them a bit. It was only when I rewatched them years later I properly liked them. Afterwards, I kept wondering, well, why didn't I like them when I first saw them? This happened again after I rewatched two of Michael Powell's and Emmerich Pressburger's movies, A Matter of Life and Death and The Red Shoes. I really liked both movies when I rewatched them, wondering, why didn't I like them the first time? Another step for me came when I rewatched a few Westerns. For a long time, I didn't like Westerns, no matter how many of the movies I saw in that genre. However, when I rewatched My Darling Clementine and Unforgiven, I found those movies better, and I wondered why I didn't like them originally. There are other movies I did this for, and the same results happened, but these are just a few examples. I can't seem to figure out why it took rewatching for me to like certain movies, because I don't recall being in a bad mood any of the times I watched those movies the first time around, but in my movie watching experience, a rewatch might be needed for me to appreciate certain acclaimed movies when I didn't like them the first time around. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, Omar, I have to say, that is something that I have found too. And, I think there's a number of factors that come into play when you watch a movie and you don't like it at first, because one, you might have an expectation of what that movie is supposed to be or is going to be. And when you start watching it, it's not that way. And it's sort of off-putting and it's frustrating. I remember going to see The Talented Mr. Ripley with Jude Law and Matt Damon. For whatever reason, I hated it. When I saw it in the theater. I saw it on Christmas Day with I went to a double feature, and maybe we were hungover and this might have had something to do with it, but I saw The Talented Mr. Ripley and Any Given Sunday, Oliver Stone's football movie with Al Pacino and every other person in the United States who was an actor seemed to have been in Any Given Sunday. Jamie Foxx, great Jamie Foxx role. Steamin' Willie Beeman, he played. And I love that movie. Hated Talented Mr. Ripley. And then I remember on video or when it came out or something, I watched it again and I'm like, I love this movie. Not only did I love this movie, I wanted to live that movie, aside from the fact that I didn't want to be like Tom Ripley and be a psychopath and kill Jude Law, but I wanted to live in Manji and go to Italy and be fabulous and hang out with Gwyneth Paltrow and wear those linen suits. I loved it. And it always perplexed me because I love that movie now. I love the soundtrack. I love everything about that movie. Why did I hate it the first time? I guess because I thought it was going to be something totally different. And it wasn't anything like I thought it was going to be. And I think I just was like, I didn't dig it. Maybe I was in a bad mood, but it wasn't what I wanted. And then when I watched it again, it was one of those things where I don't even know why I started watching it. Maybe I started watching because I'm like, did I really hate this movie? And because it was Anthony Minghella who had made The English Patient before he made Talented Mr. Ripley, and I love The English Patient. Love it. I know people don't, but I love The English Patient. Love it. And so I watched it again. I'm like, why didn't I like this movie? It's a great thriller. It's really well acted. The cast is incredible. The scenery is great. The music is great. It's suspenseful at the end. What's not to love? And I really ended up really, really liking it. And I think that happens quite a bit sometimes. You go back and you look at something. I think mostly it comes from the fact that I think it is about expectation and reality. I really do. I think that you expect something's going to be one way, and when it's not the way you want it, you end up not liking it for that reason. But then, like you said, Omar, I've revisited other movies and liked them so much more. Paul Mammer sent in a tip. And can you let me on and pitch you a grounded Reeves verse Mr. Freeze? Well, Paul, I not tonight because I have to go to bed. I have to get up. I have to be at the John Campea Studios at 10 a.m. Tomorrow, and I'm exhausted. It's a long day. But maybe I would love to hear your Reeves versus Freeze pitch. I think that would be great. Thomas Logan says, your Deacon's shot Videodrome sounds awesome and scary, Rob. Reminds me of Nia DaCosta's approach to Candyman, which was both a sequel and a remake of sorts. Jamie Campbell Bower gives me James Woods vibes, by the way. Ooh, that's a good idea. I liked Nia DaCosta's Candyman. I have it on 4K. I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. It was interesting. That was another movie. I didn't expect that movie to be that way. I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. Well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, however you identify across the 28 known galaxies, I'm going to bring this chat to an end. I want to thank, first of all, my moderator, Tom Jr. Jackson, for being a goof person. This is interesting. Let me see. Is Ivor Santatu? Is it Ivor? Did I get that right? Or Iverson? Oh, it's Iverson Tattoo. Iverson Tattoo. Can Game of Thrones make a film, or is it better suited for TV? Well, I think because it's so long, it's better suited for TV. But you know what? I bet they could make a Game of Thrones. Now that House of the Dragon worked, I bet they can make a movie set in the Thrones universe that would work. I could definitely see that happening. I don't know what that would look like. But, you know, one of the things we forgot about on the John Campea show, I keep meaning to bring this up. Somebody brought up that Warner Brothers has the rights to release theatrical features. They are making a Lord of the Rings animated movie called The War of the Rohirrim. And I could see Game of Thrones doing it like a 2-hour movie about a certain event or something, which would absolutely work. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're making more Game of Thrones, if we don't see a Game of Thrones movie at some point. I absolutely think that we could see that. Totally. At some point. I don't know what that's going to quite look like yet, but I bet we're going to see it. So again, I'm going to finally finish up this chat. I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson for moderating. I don't know if anyone else is here, Tom, but I especially want to thank everybody who supports this channel via super chats, tips, and memberships. Thank you very much. As you all know, we have bi-weekly member calls. They usually last 3 or 4 hours. We had a great one over the past weekend, so anyone who's a member can do that. We don't have one coming up this weekend, but the weekend after we will, unless that's Thanksgiving weekend. And I will still do it if it's Is it Thanksgiving weekend? Maybe it is. I'm not sure when that is, but yeah. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for generously supporting the channel in that way. Of course, there'll be another Designing Hollywood dropping this week. There's going to be many fun shows on the John Campea channel. And I got to tell you, John and Ray came up with something that's hilarious. There on Friday, I don't know how it's going to go. I want to see how it looks. They're going to do the Morbius. We're going to do the Walvis. Ray is really going to do it. The Morbius Minute, where Ray Ora is going to review every minute of Morbius. Every Friday, he's going to review 1 minute of Morbius. I love the fact that we came up with this wacky idea and we're actually going to do it. So Friday on the John Campea show, the Morbius Minute will take flight. We shall see. And on that note, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I guess I should say like and subscribe and all that. Which is, sure, absolutely. And on that note, I would say to everyone, have a better night.